The change began the night I shouldn't have gone into the woods. Everyone in town knew the stories. Warnings whispered around campfires and scrawled onto faded signs at the edge of the forest. Don't wander after dark. Stay away from the deep trails. Beware of the Skinwalker. I'd always thought it was bullshit. Folklore to keep kids out of trouble or scare away tourists. But that night, something pulled me in. I don't remember why I went. Maybe I needed to clear my head, or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't scared. I followed the trail deeper than I ever had before, the air growing colder, the trees twisting into shapes that looked almost human. Then I heard it. A voice, soft and familiar, calling my name. Ethan. I froze. It was my mother's voice, but it couldn't have been. She'd been dead for 5 years. Ethan, come here. I turned slowly, my heart pounding, and saw something in the shadows. A figure, tall and gaunt, its skin stretched too tightly over its bones. Its face was wrong, almost human, but not quite. Its eyes glinting like a predator's in the moonlight. And it was smiling. I ran. I didn't sleep that night. The memory of the figure haunted me. Its voice, its smile, the way it seemed to know me. I locked my doors, shut my windows, and told myself it was just my imagination. But the next morning, I noticed the first change. The sunlight hurt, not in the usual way, not like squinting after waking up too early. This was deeper, sharper, like needles stabbing into my eyes. By the time I got to work, my senses were dialed up to 11. The hum of the fluorescent lights was deafening. I could hear my coworkers' conversations from across the room, smell the stale coffee in the break room from my desk. And then there was the hunger. It wasn't like I was starving, it was something else, something deeper, a craving I couldn't place. At lunch, I sat with Sarah, my closest friend. She was laughing about something, but I wasn't paying attention. All I could focus on was the way her pulse beat in her neck, that faint smell of sweat and soap on her skin. I had to excuse myself before I did something I couldn't explain. By the end of the week, I couldn't deny that something was happening to me. I could run faster than I ever had before, my legs carrying me through the woods at an inhuman speed. My senses were sharper than ever, every sound, every scent, every flicker of movement painting a vivid picture of the world around me, and I loved it. I wasn't scared anymore. The fear that had gripped me after that night in the woods was gone, replaced by something new. Exhilaration. Power. For the first time in my life, I felt alive. I started testing my abilities in small ways, lifting heavy objects, sneaking up on people without making a sound. Once I mimicked Sarah's voice perfectly, watching her spin around in confusion when she heard her name. It was addictive. I didn't care that I was changing. I didn't care that my reflection in the mirror seemed off, my eyes darker, my teeth sharper. I wanted more. The cravings became impossible to ignore. Normal food didn't satisfy me anymore, no matter how much I ate. The hunger gnawed at me, a constant, insistent pull that wouldn't let me rest. One night, I found myself wandering the streets, drawn by the scent of something warm and alive. I didn't mean to hurt the stray dog. I didn't even know what I was doing until it was over, until I was crouched over its still body, my hands slick with blood, my teeth aching. But I didn't feel guilt. I felt satisfied. The changes weren't just physical anymore. I stopped going to work, stopped answering Sarah's texts. The idea of being around people made my skin crawl. They smelled too good, too tempting, and I wasn't sure I could control myself anymore. The voice started a week later. At first, I thought it was my own thoughts, but it didn't take long to realize it wasn't me. It whispered in the back of my mind, soft and insistent. Take what you need. They won't stop you. You're not like them anymore. And it was right. I wasn't. One night, I caught my reflection in the window and barely recognized myself. My skin was stretched tight over my bones, my eyes glowing faintly in the dark. My teeth had grown sharper, my fingers longer, tipped with claws. But what struck me most was my smile. It wasn't mine. It was the creature's. I should have been horrified, but I wasn't. The fear was long gone, replaced with something darker. I liked what I was becoming, and I wanted to see how far I could go. I didn't choose Sarah because I hated her. I chose her because she trusted me. She invited me over, worried about how distant I'd been. She tried to talk to me, to pull me out of whatever she thought was wrong. I let her think she could save me. It was almost too easy. Her voice, her mannerisms, her scent, I absorbed them all, wearing them like a second skin. By the time I left her house, I wasn't just Ethan anymore. I was Sarah. I spent the next few weeks wearing her face, her voice, her life. Her coworkers didn't notice the difference. Her family didn't suspect a thing. I felt invincible. But the voice wasn't satisfied. It whispered to me constantly now, urging me to take more, to lose myself completely. You don't need to pretend, it said. You're not human anymore. You're better than them. And it was right. I didn't need to pretend. I didn't need to hold on to my old life. I could be anyone, anything. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the thing I'd become. The hunger was all-consuming now, my body barely human, my mind teetering on the edge of something dark and infinite. The voice urged me to let go, to embrace the transformation completely. But deep down, a small part of me hesitated. I thought about Sarah, about the way she'd looked at me before I took her face. I thought about who I used to be, the life I'd had before the woods. Did I want to hold on to that? Or was it better to let it all burn? The next day I visited the woods, and it welcomed me like an old friend. The towering trees, the shifting shadows, the distant rustle of unseen creatures, all of it felt alive in a way it never had before. I moved through the underbrush silently, my new body attuned to every sound, every scent. It didn't take long to find my first prey. A group of campers sat around a fire, their laughter echoing through the forest. I watched them from the shadows, my glowing eyes reflecting the flickering flames. They smelled incredible. The salt of their sweat, the tang of their fear, the faint sweetness of their skin made my mouth water. But I didn't rush in. I waited, crouched in the dark, savoring the moment. When I finally stepped into the light, their screams were music to my ears. I didn't just kill them, I became them. Their voices, their faces, their memories, all of it was mine now. When I left the campsite, I wore the face of a young man named David. His life, his mannerisms, his laugh, it all felt like second nature, as though I'd been David my whole life. But the hunger didn't stop. It never stopped. Every time I fed, it grew louder, more insistent. The voice inside me whispered constantly now, urging me to take more, to lose myself completely. You're not one of them anymore, it said. You're a predator. Embrace it. And I did. I walked into towns and cities wearing stolen faces, blending in perfectly. No one suspected a thing. I was everyone and no one, a ghost moving through the world. But the more I fed, the less I recognized myself. One night, I caught my reflection in a car window and froze. It wasn't David's face staring back at me, or Sarah's, or anyone else's. It was something monstrous, a patchwork of features shifting and blending in impossible ways. My eyes glowed faintly, my teeth too sharp, my smile stretched too wide. I stepped back, my chest tightening. "Who am I?" I whispered. The voice laughed, low and cruel. "You're whoever you want to be." But that wasn't true. Not anymore. The faces I wore, the lives I stole, they weren't choices. They were masks. And the thing beneath them was hollow. For the first time, the hunger didn't feel exhilarating. It felt empty. The turning point came when I returned to my hometown. I didn't plan to. I hadn't even thought about it. But something inside me pulled me back, guiding me through the familiar streets, the familiar sights. And there, standing in the front yard of my old house, was my younger brother, Eric. He didn't see me at first. He was laughing with his friends, tossing a football back and forth, completely unaware of the thing lurking in the shadows. I should have left, but I didn't. I stepped forward, the hunger roaring in my chest. Eric turned, his smile fading as he saw me. "Ethan?" he said, his voice soft, uncertain. Hearing my name hurt more than I expected. Eric approached slowly, his brow furrowed. "Is it really you?" he asked. I nodded, my throat tightening. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. "You look different," he said finally. "What happened to you?" The hunger screamed at me to take him, to absorb his life, his memories, his warmth, but for the first time I hesitated. Eric was the last thread connecting me to who I used to be. He was the only person who still thought of me as human. And I realized I didn't want to lose that. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "For what?" he asked, confused. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and ran, the shadows swallowing me whole. The voice was furious. "You're weak," it hissed. "He was yours. You could have taken him. You should have taken him." But I didn't listen. Not anymore. For weeks I wandered aimlessly, the hunger gnawing at me, the voice screaming in my head. My body was falling apart, shifting uncontrollably, my reflection barely recognizable. I was losing myself. And then I realized what I had to do. The answer was in the woods, where it had all begun. I returned to the spot where I'd first seen the creature, the place where my transformation had started. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the trees looming like silent witnesses. There in the clearing I found it, the creature. It was waiting for me, its gaunt form motionless, its glowing eyes watching as I stepped forward. "You knew this would happen," I said, my voice steady. It tilted its head, a grotesque smile spreading across its face. "You wanted me to become like you," I continued. "But I'm not. Not yet." The creature's smile widened, its voice low and guttural. "Then finish it," it said. "Take the final step. Become what you are meant to be." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the hunting knife I'd brought with me. The creature's eyes gleamed with anticipation as I stepped closer, the blade glinting in the moonlight. But I didn't use it on the creature. I used it on myself. Hit into my arm, deep and deliberate, and black, viscous blood oozed from the wound. The creature's smile faltered as I let the blood drip onto the ground, forming a circle around us. "What are you doing?" it growled, its voice tinged with fear. "I'm ending this. I said, my voice steady. The blood circle flared to life, the ground trembling beneath our feet. The creature shrieked, its form writhing as the circle tightened, pulling it inward. "You can't stop it," it screamed. "You'll always be one of us." I stared at it, my body trembling. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." The circle collapsed, dragging the creature into the earth. The air grew silent, the shadows retreating, and for the first time, the hunger was gone. I don't know what I am anymore. I'm not human, not completely. My reflection is still wrong, my senses still too sharp, but the hunger is gone, and the voice is silent. I live alone now, far from anyone I could hurt. The woods are my home, a constant reminder of what I almost became. Sometimes I think about Eric and myself, about the life I left behind. I wonder if he remembers me, if he still hopes I'll come back. But I can't go back. Not yet. Because no matter how much I've fought it, no matter how much I've resisted, I know the creature was right. I'll always be one of them.